Alright, hey guys. What I want to do here is show you how to take your sketch and turn it into a relatively simple line icon. So you can see here we have the original sketch that I did for this icon, and then I took it into Illustrator and I used it as a template, and I created this icon here. So what's important to know here is that when you're creating these, you definitely want to try to abstract as much as you can, okay, without leaving out the important parts. So even in this one here, I didn't put all these little details of value. I even skipped creating this part here, which is what I want to do for my flat color icon. But the overall read on this still is representing this unique hotel in the UAW. Now, for these icons, okay, our actual size is going to be a lot different than what I have here. So if I'm in preview and I go to view and here actual size, okay, I can see this is a 192 by 192 image, and this is what we're shooting for with creating these icons. Alright, so let's open up Illustrator and get started on this. Alright, here we are in Adobe Illustrator, and we want to get started on our line icons. So you guys might have this version of Illustrator. I think this is 2017. If you have a newer one, that's fine. Let's go ahead and reset our workspace so that we're all working with the same setup. So I'm going to go to Window, Workspace, and I'm going to change from my personal one to this Essentials. And I'll go ahead and kind of pull my program window in a little bit so it's easier to see. Alright, so let's go ahead and set up our file so that we can create all 8 icons. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to go to File and New. Okay, you guys should be presented with something that looks like this. I'm going to go ahead and choose this web. So what this is going to do is just, it's like a preset. It makes sure that you're working in pixels instead of inches or points. Okay, it also makes sure that the color mode is RGB, which is the universal screen color space. If we wanted to, we could click on this button for more settings. Okay, and this is kind of the more classic file setup. And in this case, you can either do it from here or here, but we need to change the number of artboards from 1 to 8. And then we know that we can move our artboards around, but you can also choose the amount of columns and how they arrange themselves. As far as going from left to right, up and down, just going straight down or to the left. So right here, where it says columns, I'm going to choose 4 columns. So there's going to be 4 artboards on one row, and then it's going to switch and then go down and to the left, and there will be another set of 4 artboards. And if that was confusing, don't worry, it'll make sense once we create this new file. So the height and width for these icons, okay, these are larger icons that we're working with, and so we're going to set this to 192 px or pixels by 192. We don't need to worry about a bleed because we're not printing these, and then the rest of this can stay the way it is. So in RGB color mode, raster effects at 72 ppi, and we are all good to go. So you can either hit this one, create document, or hit the one down there, create. Alright, and so my plan is with this file is that I'm going to create all of my outline or line-based icons here at the top, and then I'll create all of my flat color icons here on this bottom row. Alright, so I'm going to pan over to this first artboard, and I will zoom in just a little bit. And what I want to do is use that sketch that I made as a template to start drawing on top of. So whenever you need to work on a file as a template, okay, instead of opening the file, you actually want to go up here to File and Place. So go ahead and try to locate any sketch that you might have done for the icon. So in this case, this is the one that I modified and then saved as a JPEG. So I'll hit place. After I do that, I have a loaded cursor. So it's asking me, where do you want to put this image? In this case, I'm going to come up here to this top corner on here, and I'm just going to click and drag. And because I cropped this image in Photoshop, okay, it's putting it in a really nice area here on the artboard. Okay, so one of the first things I want to do is I want to drop the opacity on this image. I don't want it to read with such high contrast and value. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look for this panel right here, the transparency panel. Make sure you have the object selected. I'll click on transparency and then right here opacity. Okay, I'm going to bring that way down. Let's see if I can get away with 20%, maybe even a little bit lower, 15%. You might want to work higher depending on how well your eyes can adjust. I'm pretty good at seeing those small details even at 15%, so I'm going to keep it right there. Alright, so once I'm done, I'll just collapse that. And then I'll open up here my layers panel. And you know, if you want to use this same layer to place all of your sketches, then by all means go ahead and do that. That's what I plan to do, so I'm just going to double click on the layer name it templates. And that way when I move on to the next part, I know that I'm going to place the next image right here, and I'm going to do it on the templates layer. For now, I'm going to create a new layer that goes on top of that, and I'm going to lock the templates layer. And so now I will not affect or modify that part of the image. Now here's a good idea while you're working. I came up with this strategy when I was doing some other projects for another client, and we needed to have all these icons a similar size. So one strategy is to use your rulers, so Command R, and we get our ruler set up, and we know how to click and drag and pull down some guides. In this case, we could set up our guides, let's say 20 pixels from the edge. But I'm going to show another way that I've been working. So right now, here's my my sketch, and I want to make sure that I know the center of that sketch. So I'm going to click on the artboard icon, and then right up here, remember we have these little markers. So I'm going to click right here on this center mark, and then I'm also going to click right here. This is kind of like a margin or a border. So I'm going to use this kind of as a guide for my other icons. Alright, and so when I'm done with that, I'll just hit the escape key, and now I'm ready to get started. So I'll zoom in just a little bit more and pan over. So there's a whole number of ways to approach doing a line-based icon like this. I'm just going to show you how I would approach this, but this should give you a general idea on how to go about constructing these and trying to finalize it. So since it's a line-based icon, you know, I'm going to do all of this first layer with just line work, and then at the very end I'm going to come in with another layer and then add a little bit of those spot colors. Alright, so I'm going to get started by drawing the border first. Okay, so I'm going to come over here, I'm going to choose my ellipse tool. I'll hit D for default colors. I'm not going to worry about my colors right now. I'll just work with a black stroke, and then I'll cross out the white fill. And since I want all of these round icons, okay, to be based right on this center, I'm going to make sure that my smart guides are turned on. I'll come over here to this center point. Okay, it'll tell me when I'm right on there. I'll hold down on the Option key, I'll hold down on the Shift key, and then I'll start to click and drag. Now I'm not too worried if this is not exactly lined up with my sketch. Remember, the sketch is just a basis to get started. So instead, I'm going to extend the boundaries out just a little bit more. Or I might even just shrink them in. Yeah, I think I'll shrink them in. Yeah, I'll keep it all inside this this first boundary, and then I'll release. All right, I'll increase my pixel size. I'll go over here to my stroke menu, and I keep getting this aligned to the inside. I'm going to align it to the center right here, and that should be good to get started with that. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is create this base right here on the sketch. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose my rectangle tool, and once again I'm just roughly following the outline of my sketch. I decided to pull that in just a little bit more. I'll hit A for my white arrow, and I'm just going to click on this point and I'll drag that out. I'm holding down on the shift key. I'll do the same thing on this side. Okay, now I want to create this large kind of curved part. So in that case I'm going to hit P for my pen tool, and I'm going to begin right here, right at the base. I'll click once, and there's like a rubber band effect that's already connecting it to the next part. I'll hold down on the shift key to make sure it's straight up and down, and I'll get pretty close to that edge and click again. Now instead of trying to do this curved line right now, I'm going to use the corner point tool that we had been working with in the earlier exercises. So I'm just going to draw this straight down here, and I'm going to just find where it roughly aligns to that base and click. And then since I'm done using this, I'm going to hold down on the command key and click. Now if you guys remember, if you hit shift and C, okay, you get this really cool corner point tool. It's also called the anchor point tool, and what I'm going to do is try to match that curve that I did in my sketch. So right about there, that looks pretty good. Okay, when I like it, I'll hold down on the command key and click. Now I want to create another shape that is pretty much the same proportions, just smaller. Now this path right here, it's almost identical, and it mimics proportionally this inner path right here. So in order to create this, I'm going to use the offset path command. So I'm going to come up here to Object, Path, and Offset Path. And it's going to ask me, how do you want to offset this path? I'm going to click the preview so I can see which way it's going. And yeah, it looks like I want to do about 7 pixels in. And I'm ignoring all of this part here because I know I can just delete that part of the offset. So about 7 pixels, and minor limit of 4 is good. I'll click OK. And then this is a good time to start using your scissors tool. So I can hit C for scissors, or I can click on the icon, and I'm going to come in right here, right where I start to see these paths intersecting. Okay, and I'm going to click once right there. I'm going to come over to this side and I'll click once right there. Okay, and so now I have this individual segment, okay, disconnected from the outer one. I'll hit V for my black arrow. I'll click this outer path and delete it. Alright, for this next path right here, okay, I can do the same thing that I did using this anchor point tool. So I'm going to hit P for the pen tool, and I'm going to start way down here, right at the edge where these two meet. I might make this a little bit bigger than what's on my sketch. I'll click once right there, come all the way up to the top right here, and I'll click. I'll hold down on the command key and click to be done with that. I'll hit Shift C to get this anchor point tool, and I'll pull that curve into place. Command click when I'm done. Alright, so at this point I want to do these horizontal kind of window sections that run along this part of the building. And so I'm going to use the line tool for that. Before I go any further, I want to make sure that I don't have some snapping features turned on. So traditionally when you work with icons and pixel-based creations, sometimes using this, the snap to pixel, can be really convenient. But in this case, we're not going to do that. So you want to make sure that you have snap to pixel off, and you can choose to have this on. This can be helpful. This is snap to grid, okay, and we are working on a pixel grid, so I'll have that turned on. And now I'm going to go over, I'm going to use my line tool, and I'll start to click and drag from here. I know that I need to repeat these all the way down, so I'm going to extend this out pretty far because I know it needs to go beyond this portion. I'll hit V for my black arrow, I'll hold down on the Option key, and I'll drag that part down, and then I'll hit Command D a few times. So I can get all the way down to there. So obviously I do not want this part of the line segments, and so in this case I'm going to use my shape builder tool. So with my black arrow I'm going to click and drag to do a marquee selection of these segments. I'll hold down on the shift key to select this segment here, okay, and then I'll find my shape builder tool, so right here. Now if you remember from the exercises, you can subtract and combine shapes, but you can also subtract lines. So in this case I'm going to subtract all these lines. I'm going to hold down on my option key, and then I'll click and drag through these segments and release, and then those should disappear. Hit my black arrow tool when I'm done. Now at this point I'm going to start adding some stylistic features to this, but I'm going to pretend like there's a light source coming down this way onto the building, even though I realize there is a sun here in the background, but I'm going to just pretend right here there's a light source coming down this way, okay, and it's affecting, okay, some of these other parts of the line work. To start and create these stylizations, I'm going to use the scissors tool, and the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this circle going through my building. So I'll turn my smart guides on. I'll select the object that I need to cut. In this case it's the circle boundary, and I'm going to cut it about right there, and then I'll come in and I think I'll cut it right about here. So I'll get rid of that segment. I'll hit delete. The next thing I want to get rid of is this part of the line here. I think as long as these segments come and they stop here, they'll do a really good job of defining this edge, and I won't even need this whole segment here. So I'm going to hold down on the command key, select that segment, and I will cut it right there. Okay, and then I'll select this other segment and delete that. And at this point I'm going to test it out by rounding out the edges. So I'm going to change the cap from a regular cap to a rounded cap. And the other thing I want to do is I want to maybe cut off some of this part on the image, because I think this can be defined by just a few lines. So I'm going to select it and I'll cut it right here. I'll select this part and I will cut that right there, delete that inner portion, okay, and then I'll do one more. This has become kind of a popular stylistic feature, but leaving just small little implied line marks right here so that the viewer kind of uses their eye to finish this shape. I'm going to go ahead and use my black arrow. I'll select all of those line segments and I'll just change them to rounded, okay, and rounded corners. Let's see how that looks. Alright, so let's go ahead and keep working. So right here I'm going to do, there's like two small little butt outs here. I have no idea what exactly they are, but these are some strong stylistic features on this building. So I'm going to go over here and I'll choose my, my rounded rectangle tool, and I'll go ahead and create a rounded rectangle right here. This is an icon that needs to be defined by lines, but this shape is so small, okay, that I can convert this to a fill, and it's basically just going to look like a solid line that's really thick. I might even thicken this up just a little bit more. I'll go ahead and use my line tool, and I see right here I need to reset that. Alright, so that's good. And then finally this portion right here. Now these are actually created with the ellipse tool. So I'm going to choose the ellipse tool. I'll create this first portion here. Zoom in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and move it up. And then I need to create another ellipse that kind of follows the inside right here. But I want it to be right in the same spot, so right where the center point is. So I'm going to copy it, Command C, and then I'm going to paste in place. Command Shift and V, and then I'll shrink it down a little bit and then move it. So I get something like that. And then at this point I'm going to select all those shapes involved, and I'll start using my shape builder to subtract out some of these segments. So like right here and here, we don't need those. Instead I'm going to use my line tool. I'll draw a line there, and I will draw a line there. I'm going to go ahead and create a group with this shape. I'm going to use my selection tool, select all of those segments, and then I'll hit Command and G. And I've decided I want to squish this just a little bit more, move it in here. And I want to be careful because I'm looking at the space between these. When you get these too close, you start to get kind of an uncomfortable read. So I'm going to make sure that I have this kind of positioned where it's going to flow nicely. Alright, and I'll start giving it some of my, my stylistic cuts to it. I'll cut it about right here, there. And I'll delete that part. And I might even cut here, here, here. Zoom in a little bit more. There we go. So we're just about done. I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to cut off this whole end here. Because once again, your mind's eye kind of throws that together, and I'll just extend that out. We'll need another line that goes back here, and I'll go ahead and do the ellipse for this sun, this setting sun behind here. I'll put it about right there. I'll hit C from my scissors tool, and I will give it some cuts. Alright, so moving along, I want to finish some of these other parts. So in this case, I'm going to try to make these palm tree silhouettes. So I'll just come in with my pen tool and make sure my fill is off. And again, the sketch is just kind of a general map on how to place things and you know, general content. So I'm again adjusting a little bit with that. And I might end up changing some parts. So I get started with the trunk, and then I'll just start using the line tool, adding a little bit of a curve. Zoom in a little bit closer. As you can see, this anchor point tool is really handy. I don't have to spend a lot of time draw all those curves with the pen tool. Alright, so this is pretty good, but I know I can add more character to these strokes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose these what should be palm leaves, and if you remember, we can change the stroke profile. So I'm going to change it to this one where it's tapered on both ends, and for this bottom one, let's see if I could get away with something like this. That looks pretty good. So when you are doing pixelated icons, when you finally get these prepped for the web, sometimes you find that some of these fine tapered points get reinterpreted, and so it's one of those things where you kind of adjust the file through trial and error to figure out what works best. But for this project, you know, we're just kind of getting our feet wet making these simple icons. Alright, so I have one of those done. I'll go ahead and just select it all and group it. Command G. I'll make a copy of it and bring it right over here, and then I can actually flip this thing without using the reflect tool. I can just grab this point on the bounding box, pull over to this side. I'll go ahead and give that a little more of a tilt. And I'll make one more copy, and I'll put this guy down here. If I were to actually use this, I need to make sure that I'm working with at least 1 pixel, of stroke width, so I can see this fits that. Let's set this at 3. That's a little too thick. I'll bring that back down to 2. Alright, so at this point we are pretty much complete with the outline work for this icon, but we can start thinking about color now. One other thing before you complete your outlines is just make sure that you are set on the how these strokes are capped and cornered. So in this case, I want all of my caps to be round, but you can see when I do that, some of these end up running into each other, or the gap is just too small. So what I'm going to do is come in and make sure that there's a sufficient gap between these strokes. I might do something like that. And the other thing I'm going to check is just make sure that I'm working with at least 1 pixel thickness. The other thing I could do at this point is start to adjust the stroke weight so that it's consistent all throughout. And I'm applying the appropriate stroke weight for each part. So in this case, the container, I think I might want to have this container be just a little bit thicker than the rest of the stroke weight. And I'll test out making the outline of this building a thicker stroke weight. See how that looks. Okay, I kind of like that. I'll make this one a little bit thicker as well. And as far as colors, I'd say at this point we can just be working with the swatches that are provided. But if you want, okay, we went over a demo or an exercise where we set up custom color swatches, and so you can do that as well. Another cool thing is to just come in here to the stroke library, or the swatch library rather, and then try to find some swatches that are preset, kind of pre-made, and they have a theme. So the color books are the most extensive one, so these are the ones you would use if you're doing more commercial printing or spot color printing. The ones that show up with your file are these default swatches, the art and illustration. Okay, you also have some of these other ones, like for instance, we have a web set of swatches, so these would be safe for using on the web. And so I'm going to try this one. I'm going to go for kind of scientific color schemes. I'm going to go for complementary, see what it gives me. And that's a pretty basic color scheme. You see you have your red and green, and then all the way down yellow and purple. These are complementary colors. So what I want to do is I want to convert all these strokes into one color. So the way I can do that is I can just select everything, or what I can do is select one stroke and then come up here to the select menu, go to same, okay, and then I can say stroke color. I want to select all the other strokes with this same black color fill, okay, and that makes sure anything with that stroke color is being selected. I'll go ahead and start experimenting. I'll make sure my stroke is active. I'll have to bring up that complementary color again, and I'll go through and start kind of playing around with this. So for this outline, I do want something that's darker. Okay, I don't want to be using something that's too light against this kind of background. So I kind of like that. I'll go ahead and select this part and make sure that I have my fill selected, and then you got to kind of go through and find that swatch again. It's usually over here in the dock, but I'll fill that. Okay, so now that I have my strokes colored, I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, and this is going to be my spot color. Small splashes of color behind the stroke, just to kind of give it a little more character. And I'm going to move this behind or under the stroke layer. I'll go ahead and name this strokes. You can name it outlines as well, and I'm going to lock that layer. I'm going to turn off the template just to see how this is looking. Okay, and then I'll select this layer and I'll name it color. So what I'm thinking might look nice is to just have some offset spot color that is kind of describing some of the windows and the sun. This might be a consistent theme that I use throughout my icons. So I'm going to start off with the rectangle tool. And I'll go back to those complementary colors. Maybe I'll choose something like this, this light blue, and I'll throw that down. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I might even try something a little bit lighter and see how that looks. Yeah, I kind of like that too. So I'll take this and I will copy it and duplicate it down the row, and then I'll put a little spot color, okay, for this sun. So I'm holding down the shift key, and to move it into place I'm holding down on the space bar. I'm just trying to roughly match that radius. I'll release. And I'll start to change this color, and I kind of like this. I'll arrange that behind. So I'll right click, arrange, send to back. And then I'm going to do one more stylistic trick. I'll offset the colors. So I'm going to do a marquee selection on those. And I'll hit the down arrow a few times, and I'll hit the left arrow a few times. This is kind of a popular stylistic treatment where you lay down the color and then you just give them a little bit of an offset. It's supposed to mimic a printing process where you sometimes see a little bit of an imperfection getting the color to outline the shape. Sometimes there's a little bit of an aberration, and some people really like it. Alright, I'm going to zoom out and I'll turn off that artboard margin outline, turn off my guides, and that's looking pretty good. So I'll go ahead and save this. I should have been saving all throughout that work process. And then if I wanted to, okay, I could test this to see how it's actually going to look as a a small icon. So I'm going to go to File and Export. I'm going to do Export As. And right down here, I'm going to save it as a PNG. I'm going to choose this one, Use Artboards, because I want to maintain that boundary. I'll hit Export. For the resolution, for now, I'll choose just 72 ppi. And then the aliasing, I'm going to do Art Optimized. And then click OK. I'll minimize my window and I'll double click on that, and then I'll go to View and make sure Actual Size is checked. Okay, and this is how this icon would look in a web-based application. So I'd say that's pretty good. I like the style so far. So if I were to approach some of my other icons, I would do the same process. So I would start by placing that template of a sketch, okay, as a bottom layer, dropping the opacity. Okay, I'd create a new layer on top for my line work, and then I would just kind of dive in and get started by drawing those outlines, okay, using the anchor point tool, so Shift C, and then also getting out the scissors tool and using that to kind of cut up the lines, give them more character, and redefine the overall look. And then finally I would color those strokes, and I would create a new layer to add the spot color behind, and that's optional. That's not required for this project. So I hope that was helpful, guys. I'm going to do another demo where I do the flat style icon. So good luck, guys.